Morning, Mr. Chairman. Adam Schiff. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
I've waited so long to call you Mr. Chairman. I'm going to say it over and over and over, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
I do not mind at all.
And I understand you're hiring a lot of people. I don't have any legal background, but I'll do anything, light dusting, anything it is that you need.
Excellent. We will welcome you to the bunker.
She makes really good, strong coffee.
So you're obviously beefing up your staff for the Russia probe. Mr. Chairman, so much to talk to you about this morning. I'm not sure where to start. We've since I've just talked to you last, we've had now how many Trump-Russia bombshells, right? And I was saying that I would not want to play poker against you because when I see you on TV and they ask you something that is clearly something classified that you know but the rest of us don't know, you don't blink.
Well, I have a colleague who tells me, when the bombshell is coming, will I blink and to let them know? And then they stare at me until I have to blink.
Yes, maybe we could just get some little signal like the Carol Burnett ear thing or something. Obviously, I think the most, and we've sort of talked about this, but the fact that this is not just a criminal investigation, but a counterintelligence investigation, I think is really at the crux of this, right? That, I know everybody's talking about the article that the obstruction, what if the obstruction is the collusion, right? That it is stopping us from finding out what Russia really did and the extent of it, correct?
Well, there's no clear line in some cases between what's criminal and what is counterintelligence because someone that is working in cahoots or conspiring with a foreign entity, that's obviously a security and a counterintelligence problem, but it can also be a crime. And so, I can't tell you, I can't speak to the special counsel's investigation. In our committee, from the very beginning, we viewed this predominantly as a counterintelligence threat, that all these people affiliated with the Trump campaign were having these secret meetings, secret communications with the Russians, were lying about it, and that obviously came to include the president in terms of his own false statements about all of this. And, the most egregious, of course, although it's becoming a long list, were the deliberately false statements that he helped contrive about that meeting in Trump Tower where the Russians had set up the meeting with the promise of dirt on his opponent, and his son had said they would love to have Russian assistance, and first they denied any such meeting ever took place, and then when they were confronted with the evidence of it, they said, okay, we had a meeting, but it was about adoptions, which wasn't true. And we continue to learn more about the participants in that meeting, including Vesselnitskaya, who was recently indicted by the special counsel. So, those counterintelligence concerns go on, and now to learn that the president, has been talking repeatedly about leaving NATO, there is nothing Vladimir Putin would more want to see, nothing more detrimental to our national security interests than something like that, and it's just so hard to explain.
You said it best in a tweet, Chairman Schiff. You said the American people need to know the president is working in our national interest and for no other end. I'm sure you've seen over the last couple of nights, I forget the counterintelligence guy that said on Rachel Maddow, it pains me to say this, but the president is a clear and present danger to the national security of the United States. And then John Brennan echoed that last night on TV. I keep feeling like I've been an alarmist, and then I hear people like that know way more than I do, including you, of classified information, and it is terrifying, isn't it?
It is terrifying. It's terrifying in a number of ways. Whether Bob Mueller is able to prove criminal conspiracy or not, the fact of the matter remains, whatever the motivation for Donald Trump, what he is doing is unquestionably damaging our standing in the world, our relationship with our allies. It's empowering our enemies. And so the effect, whatever the cause, the effect of his actions is just universally detrimental. And, one of the concerns that many of us have in the Capitol, and I was just speaking with one of my colleagues about it this morning, is what happens when his back is really up against the wall and his poll numbers continue to tank and he's feeling surrounded. Is this the kind of president that would provoke a foreign confrontation to buck up his standing? And one of the things that gives me reason for grave concern about that is when Barack Obama was president, there were 4 occasions in which Donald Trump tweeted that, watch, Obama's going to provoke a conflict with Iran to prop up his sagging numbers. And this president does nothing except project onto others what he would do, and that also concerns me greatly.
And well, I was going to say, I've been saying that, since day one, and then on cue, we get the story about them drawing up a plan to attack Iran, right, that we've already learned about. I feel like such a sense of urgency, Mr. Chairman, and I know you do too. You also tweeted last year, we sought to obtain the interpreter's notes or testimony from the private meeting between Trump and Putin. The Republicans on our committee voted us down. Will they join us now? Shouldn't we find out whether our president is really putting America first? And again, I get it about precedent, and it's supposed to be, confidentiality for interpreters, but we are in unprecedented times, aren't we?
We certainly are, and we're looking at the legal issues involved as to whether they could make any claim of executive privilege. It doesn't seem to me that a privilege applies. We're not talking about the president conferring with his staff and the purpose behind an executive privilege that the president should be allowed to have unfettered conversations with his staff. We're talking about a foreign communication between the president of the United States and Vladimir Putin. And so it seems to me there are grounds to find out about those conversations, to get those notes, but we are exploring our legal remedies at this point. But one thing that is abundantly clear, and that is the Congress is going to have to take steps to make sure we protect the country, because this president isn't, and there are just too many profoundly alarming actions being taken by the president, like making sure no one is in the room when he talks to Vladimir Putin, and any record of that conversation is in his possession, and who knows what has been done with it.
Speaking of Republicans on your committee, your friend Devin Nunes seems to be in the news. What?
He is in the news. He is in the news quite often.
Yes, but so what do you make of this? The Nunes meeting at Trump's D.C. hotel. Michael Flynn was there. Certainly, his. I would object to them characterizing things as a caper or a stunt that he pulled. I think it's more serious than that. Well, don't you?
Well, certainly the midnight run where he went to this undisclosed location in the middle of the night and said that he gained access to documents showing that essentially the Obama administration was spying on the Trump campaign, which turned out to be complete nonsense. And the midnight location was the White House. So he gets this from Trump's people, and then he goes to the White House and presents Trump's people with what he got from Trump's people.
Right.
I mean, that would be, I guess, comical in a Keystone Coppers kind of way if it wasn't so serious, if it wasn't in the middle of an investigation into the most serious attack on our democracy, in recent memory. And what he was really doing was trying to subvert the investigation. These latest reports about special counsel and the Southern District of New York Prosecutor's Office looking at a meeting before the inauguration with foreign nationals and looking into it for both the reason that inauguration funds may have been improperly spent on other things, but also that, more seriously, foreign nationals may have illegally funneled money into that puny inauguration. Those are serious issues, and I can't really opine on what the chairman's role was. I don't know anything more than I saw in those press reports.
Oh, quick correction. He's not the chairman anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman.
Even the former chairman, but I'm happy to call him ranking member.
Yes. So I want to get your reaction to this, though. He said yesterday, speaking of continuing to deflect.
Remember, they were already investigating. They had FISA warrants up on Trump campaign advisors. We know from the text messages that at that time there was no there from the lead investigator. So it appears to me like, we don't know when these investigations stop or start.
So you got Lindsey Graham yesterday also saying that you got to clean up the FBI. Are they willfully trying to ignore that they know that there was a counterintelligence operation going on and they were targeting Russians, not Americans, not the Trump campaign? It's that so many people in the Trump campaign were communicating with Russians that they were intercepted, correct?
Yes, I mean there were certainly deep concerns, well-founded concerns that law enforcement and the FBI had about what they were seeing in terms of actions by those affiliated with the Trump campaign. It would have been negligent not to investigate them and not to make sure that our security wasn't being compromised. Why Mr. Nunes and Lindsey Graham are saying these things, look, they obviously feel this is helpful to the president's defense. It helps, foster or cement their relationship with the president. But they really tar themselves when they do this. By tarring the FBI, I think they bring disrepute on themselves.
Yeah.
And they do a disservice to the country that is relying on the FBI to keep them safe.
Yep. It sounds like you had the same reaction to the Barr hearing yesterday that I did. You had a couple great tweets. You said, whatever Barr's other qualifications, there's no doubt that authoring the memo was why he was nominated. Barr knows it. Trump knows it. The Senate can't ignore it. Promising to recuse is the only way to preserve confidence in the DOJ and protect Mueller. You also said under Barr's reading of the law, an obstruction case Mueller may be pursuing is asinine. He says results of Mueller's report should be made public, but nothing about its contents. And he has a view of presidential power that renders all of his promises moot. The Senate must vote no. I was deeply troubled by a lot of his answers yesterday, as it looks like you were as well.
It's astounding to me how we have dumbed down qualifications for office. Now, I'm not saying that in a normal circumstance, and if there wasn't a Mueller investigation, that Bill Barr wouldn't be qualified. He's obviously had the job before. But how are we at a place where it is okay for a nominee to the highest law enforcement position in the land to say, if I'm urged by ethics lawyers at the Justice Department to recuse myself, I can't tell you I'm going to follow their advice?
Right.
Is it too much to ask that we have an attorney general who's committed to following the advice of ethics lawyers?
Yeah.
The reality is, though, Stephanie, he knows what their advice is going to be. Their advice is going to be the same advice they gave to Matt Whitaker because the circumstances are the same.
Yep.
The public won't have confidence in any role you play in this. You should recuse yourself. But he already knows he's not going to, because if he was going to, he would not have been nominated. And we shouldn't accept that. It's simply not the case that the only two people qualified to be Attorney General in America are people who have expressed prejudicial views of the Mueller probe before they were put in that position. Certainly, we can do better than that. And the other thing that really concerned me about his testimony yesterday, besides his unwillingness to recuse himself or even follow the advice of ethics lawyers, is the fact that he says that he won't commit to making the Mueller report public.
Yep.
He'll basically do his own Cliff Note version of that.
Yeah. He'll let us know what he thinks is important. That's in there.
And he's taken the position, which I also disagree with, that a sitting president can't be indicted, and that impeachment is the remedy, if there's to be a remedy, for improper conduct by a president. But at the same time, he's saying, I'm not going to share with Congress or the American people the evidence that they would need to determine whether that is appropriate. And that amounts to a form of immunity. You can't indict him, and we won't give you the evidence to support an impeachment. So, where does that leave the accountability and the rule of law?
Well, I mean, I think we have never been confronted with this before in our histories. We just had Jill Wine-Banks on, who, the Watergate prosecutor, who, of course, has said this is way worse than Watergate. Nixon was a crook, but he was our crook. I mean, there was not a hostile foreign power involved. I mean, in terms of him shutting down the government of the United States of America, again, I love that Trump tried to undermine Leader Pelosi, of course, Speaker Pelosi yesterday, by inviting several moderate House Democrats to the House for lunch, and they said no. And good for them. And you tweeted, the GOP controlled the House and Senate for 2 years under Trump. If the wall was such an emergency, they could have used reconciliation to pass it with 50 votes in the Senate. Why didn't they? It's suddenly an emergency now that Democrats are in control, right?
Apparently the emergency is that he was criticized by Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter.
Yeah.
And that he couldn't abide that because we had an agreement to keep the government open. And the Senate, controlled by the Republicans, passed the bills in order to do it as we did in the House. What changed is he was called weak by his right flank. And that was not something he could accept, so he decided politically he needed to shut us down. If he loses any part of that hardcore base, then he knows that he's finished, and so he's going to make the whole country suffer to show just how tough he is. But
Yep.
I think what people need to remember is the shutdown has nothing to do with border security. There was no reason to shut down the government to negotiate over what would be necessary in terms of border security. This was simply the president using these federal workers as essentially a hostage in these negotiations and making the country feel pain unless he gets what he wants.
Yep. As I've often said to you, regarding Trump and Rush Limbaugh, you are kind enough to come on my show, but you do not listen to any of my advice, which it once again goes to your exquisite judgment, and I thank you for that.
What advice am I not listening to?
Mine, which is good for you. That it shows better judgment. All I call you is Smooth Jazz Congressman. That's the only name I've ever called you.
I like that. That's even better than chairman.
Yeah, all right. Mr. Chairman, thanks for taking time. I know you were so busy. We will check in with you soon, I hope.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
All right, there he goes.